morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming to you again on allpointstv.com, and we are here on Memorial Day. And we hope you are having a great Memorial Day and you are thinking about the ones who have fallen in the service of the country, and that you will, in fact, give some type of obeisance to those who have made the ultimate sacrifice, because we are as free as we are. I put that in quotation marks. We are as free as we are because of their sacrifice. We are as free as we are and not as free as we ought to be. We are going to talk a little bit about Memorial Day, because this is one of the most important holidays that we have in this country. And I was just talking to John before we came on the air, and we were discussing whether or not Memorial Day is a bigger holiday than Veterans Day. And I think that this day is a little bit bigger because of the fact that those persons that we're honoring on this day are the ones who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And I don't know where that commitment comes from, where you would in fact sacrifice your life in the for the safety of others. You know, it's kind of like a non-selfish type of thing, because a lot of the person that you are making the sacrifices for, you don't even know these persons, but you're doing it because of your patriotism toward the country. And I think that we owe anyone who would do that, who would make that type of sacrifice, I think we owe them more than what we see that we are being delivered in, that's being delivered in their name. You have to think about, what do we owe these people? And I think we owe them at least to hold these politicians, at a minimum, to hold these politicians accountable for what they do in Washington and other parts of the country, but certainly in the nation's capital, where they are over the entire country. And what they're doing, we certainly need to hold them to account, because what they're doing underneath the umbrella of those sacrifices, they're running the country into the ground. And really, I think it's disrespectful to those sacrifices that they're making, because when you make the ultimate sacrifice, you want it to count for something. And I don't think that we have politicians really worthy. I don't know of any of them in the nation's capital I would consider to be worthy of the sacrifices that have been made, because I don't see them up there standing up for the country. And most of them up there in Washington are there for the highest bidder.
I'd like to know this. Okay, they make what, 174 congressmen, 174,000 a year. Mm-hmm. After they get elected once, maybe twice, and they either decide not to run again or they don't get reelected, they walk away and you find out that their bank balance is in the millions. I mean,
How did that happen?
I know a few financial advisors, and they're pretty damn good, but these people are like stellar. Yeah. Whoever they got. Yeah. And it doesn't help that Pelosi and her husband, when everybody else was losing money on the stock market, she and her husband were making millions off it because insider info, insider to trader information and stuff. I mean, these people are, and it goes for both parties. Yeah. They're already millionaires, and most of them are before they go into office. Then they're going to tell us how the working class feels. Many of them never worked. There's like 4 generations of them never worked a day in their lives, never struggled, never did a paycheck to paycheck.
1,000%. John, if they were so good with money, how is it that they're able to become millionaires as members of Congress, but they can't balance the budget? And if they're so good at managing money, how do we account for the fact that when they're managing our money, they don't do quite as well? We got a $20 trillion deficit, national debt, and that's just what they have on the books for the time being. It grows every day because they postpone a lot of the debt and place it into the future. And every day that passes, the future arrives here. I mean, tomorrow tomorrow will be today's future. So tomorrow you get more debt. And they got about $200 trillion of debt awaiting us into the future. And so they're not managing the economy very well, but these guys are able to take $174,000 a year. They are having to pay for 2 residences, one where they maintain a household where they are supposedly residents in the state, although we know they don't really live in these residences. It's just a house that is there with their name on it. And they're able to maintain that, and then where they actually stay close to the nation's capital, and they're able to do that on $174,000 a year. Now, 50% of the people, in the whole Congress, we're talking about the Senate and the House, of the 535 members of the House and Senate, 100 members in the Senate, 435 members in the House of Representatives, and of that 535 member body, 50% of them, you can do the math, 50% of them are millionaires on $174,000 a year. Now you can show me how they do that. And if they're that good at managing money, we should feel very good about them managing our money because they're doing so well with their own finance. So either one or two things is true. Either they're not as attentive to the people's money as they are their own finance, or the other thing is true, and that is that they are criminals and they are involved in some untoward financial dealings that are not on the table or above the table, but underneath the table, and they're doing some things that are illegal that they have not been caught at. And I don't think it's the fact that they're so good in handling finance, because they're not handling the finance of the, which is we sent them there to handle the finance of the nation. And you would think that if you're putting the best minds on the table, with 535 person, you put the best minds on the table, then they go there and all this energy, all this intelligence that we place in one place is concentrated in the Congress. You would think they'd be able to put all this divinely inspired intelligence in one place and we'd be able to resolve some of these problems. But no, we've not seen that. We've seen them not able to handle a budget of $3.27 trillion a year, and after they spend that money, they then go and spend the money of the children. That's what the national debt is about. They're spending the money by borrowing the money from the prosperity of the future and bringing it into the present, and keeping the nation afloat by borrowing money. They're not. Who are they borrowing? People ask when they have a national debt, who are they borrowing it from?
See, I was glad that when he met up with NATO the other day, Trump brought up the fact it's like you're not paying your fair share. They're not. I mean, everybody goes on about Europe and Canada always having this ability, give so much because they care so much about their people. But they don't understand that we are the world cop. We're on the hook for billions of dollars a day. Yeah. Billions. I'm not joking. Every time we send out troops out there, they got to have support, infrastructure built, everything maintained, civilian contractors there. You got to have people paid there that have to go be passed muster through background checks. Costs lots of money to do all this stuff. And then they wonder why America is like saying, he said this, he's a business guy. He sees that these guys are deadbeats. Most of the NATO countries are deadbeats. So Japan right now stepping up. Japan's stepping up right now. We're looking at North Korea. They're stepping up their game for themselves and actually getting, because they know that they're facing a potential horrific enemy in the hands of North Korea, that nut job running North Korea. But yeah, he is so absolutely right in that respect. I wish some presidents, they've alluded to it, but they never had the balls to say it to their face, and that's what he did. He did that. Who did he offend? What are these people actually done to the United States?
For one, he offended Angela Merkel. He offended Emmanuel Macron from France. He offended Theresa May of Britain, and all of these. Have you been watching what Angela Merkel said? And they act like this is some type of oppression, that she gets up there and says that we can no longer rely upon the United States, that we're going to have to go and take care of our own security. Well, I hope so. Hello, somebody. Who do you think should be the custodian of your own security? And what Donald Trump did, finally, as John was saying, he has simply placed a ball in the court of Europe and told them to pay for your own defense. Why should that be subsidized by the taxpayers of this country, with these politicians over here being fast and loose, not with their money, fast and loose with the taxpayers' money? And John, did you see the look on their face in Europe when Donald Trump was talking to them about paying your fair share?
Yeah, like, well, yeah, it's like, no, you guys, another thing is true, people don't understand this. People do not understand this. At the end of Second World War, the United States poured billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars into Europe. billions of dollars to rebuild Europe. The economic success they had was largely put upon by the American people building their infrastructure, rebuilding those countries. Americans are, they turn around and they snub us at every turn. They're so arrogant. You'd never, I can understand being grateful for 10 years after the fact, but it seems like it's so waned so quickly. They should have been grateful to the United States for their very existence, because if it wasn't for the United States sending thousands of people's lives, into the fray, and all the billions of dollars we spent, given the Lend-Lease program. Did we ever get a damn dime even from England? No. The only country ever paid its debt to the United States was the country of Finland.
Yeah.
So, that's got to be, and I grew up hearing that stuff. I grew up hearing that stuff because I had friends and family members who were in the military who had seen this firsthand, had seen the crap that the Europeans did. As soon as the war was done, de Gaulle's attitude towards the United States, Charles de Gaulle, was appalling.
Yes, it was. Charles de Gaulle is the one that forced the United States off of the gold standard. Eventually, I know that he, in '71, went off the gold standard under Nixon, but I know he wasn't there at that point. But I'm talking about the run on the gold in this country was because of Charles de Gaulle, who in 1959 began to question the dollars that were flooding in Europe, and he questioned those dollars and said, "We don't think you have the gold to back these dollars up." And began to ask for the gold in response to the dollars that was circulating in Europe that helped rebuild Europe through the Marshall Plan. And by having this run on the gold in the United States, that's what really has brought the currencies of the world to their knees, because all the currencies in the world right now are fiat currencies. And it goes back to 1971, and before that it goes back to the Brentwood Conference in 1944, where they had a conference in Brentwood, New Hampshire, where 44 nations sent about 730 representatives to this conference, and they were trying to determine how they're gonna show up their economies in the aftermath of World War II, because World War II had smashed these economies, and they were trying to figure out how they're going to rebuild themselves. And on what currency are they going to use that will have enough gold in that particular currency that could back up the currencies of the 44 nations that were meeting? And they decided the only country that could do that was a country that had become the recipient of the gold around the world. It was buying American products in World War II, because we didn't get involved in the war until 3 years into that war. The war started in 1939. We didn't get involved in it till 1942. And so we had 70% of the gold at that time was the United States. And so the idea was then let's base our currency, because the gold was not in the same supply in other parts of the world. Let's then base our currency upon the dollar, because the dollar is backed up by gold. And the United States had promised at that point to back the dollar up with 1 ounce of gold for every $35 dollars that was out in print. We would back it up by 1 ounce of gold. Of course, you know what politicians would do, and that's another thing these politicians did in Washington. That was have a commitment and then break their commitment and do something different. And they started churning out dollars, and before you knew it, they got more dollars out there than they promised that they would have in circulation. And de Gaulle picked it up in '59 and said, "Okay, give us the gold for the dollars you have out there." And they tried to act like they had the gold to that inflationary currency, because inflation is government induced, right? When they just print more dollars that are chasing after goods that's not producing the same quantities of dollars are being produced, and then inflation occurs, and you create a imbalance in trade. De Gaulle wanted to send those dollars back to the United States, and when he did that, then it set up in motion a run on the gold of the United States. And in 12 years, the U.S. had to admit, not to the American people, we haven't even caught on yet to what happened in 1959 and what went off the gold standard in 1971, but within 12 years, we were forced off the gold standard.
But see, the thing is, what happened if we actually turned around at the end of the Second World War and told we were told the countries of Europe, we want payback for what we've given you? Could they build their infrastructure without our help? I mean, look at we put the money into the war and all the billions of dollars afterwards. Mm-hmm. And we've always been more concerned about other countries when we have our own existence.
Yeah, that's because we get these fake, talk about fake news. We get these fake politicians. They're fake because they pretend that we have representative government in the United States. The whole spiel: government of the people, government by the people, and government for the people, by the people, of the people. And all that's an illusion. You don't have any representatives. There's no representative government in Washington, D.C.
Well, let's face it. The best way to do it, get representation, is become a multi-billionaire yourself somehow. And then what you do is you go to a person who's a rising star, looks good in a suit, maybe a pre-law student, buy them from the onset. Control every part of the aspect of media exposure, create a biography about them and everything else, just package them, and then basically you pay for their entire career, a shot at their career, but they have to do your bidding. Could you imagine how bizarre that would be if actually the United States people decided to do that and then collectively put resources together and do this? They actually have a better chance of getting something done for them mm-hmm. and for their interest than they would. And there is, I do say the left, and some people on the left have an absolute perfect thing about when they go against corporatism or, crony capitalism. They're absolutely right for going against that. They are also, that's when I was interviewing the people from the, Occupy Wall Street groups a few years back. They had common ground with the libertarians. They both wanted to address the issue of the Federal Reserve. They wanted to eliminate it. And both camps, left and right, left and libertarian, saw the same issue, or largely the same issue. But that basically, it's a conduit, it's a monetary supply, but basically it's control of a handful of people with very little oversight from the U.S. people. Our congressmen, senators have very little oversight on who's elected to that or put into it. Mm-hmm. It's just nominal. We approve, okay. Let's face it, they know they can't really stand up these people at this point because they're the ones who control the faucet.
Yeah, Del Lorenzo's book called Organized Crime, The Unvarnished Truth About Government, one of the chapters deals with the Federal Reserve, and there's a pamphlet, I think it's a pamphlet, I've read it, but I can't remember if it's a pamphlet or a book, written by Murray Rothbard, and it's the name of it is What Have They, meaning the Fed, and in that respect, the federal government, what have they done to our money? And what they've done to our money is that they have substituted what they've done is take the money out of supply, quite frankly. And what they put in its place is paper. We don't have, there's no money in this system. What you have in the system is currency. They got paper with people's pictures on it, put some numbers on it, 10, 5. And if you want to exchange it, you used to be able to exchange the money because it was money based upon some species, right? Either gold or silver. And you can carry it, and they will say this is exchangeable for this amount of gold. Now go look at it now. And they have it all in code language, so you're not supposed to be able to understand what they're saying. But they use these words like this is legal tender. What is that? You ask these politicians who put it on there from the U.S. Treasury Department, what do you mean by this is legal tender? What's legal? What's tender about it? There's nothing tender about that. It's legal because anything the government does is legal. It's not going to make itself an outlaw agency, so it's legal in the sense that the government made it legal. And if you want to say constitutional, that's another thing. But legal is what the government says. The government established legality. And it does not mean that it's constitutional because it's legal. It just means that if they do it, if the government does it, the government doesn't go to jail as a result of it. Now, Madoff goes to jail because Madoff is not the government. And you would go to jail if you did what Hillary Clinton did, but you're not part of the government. And so they got this thing, legal tender. Yes, legal, but there's nothing tender about it. What they mean by legal tender is that, and they don't put money on the dollar bill because it's not money, it's currency. And legal tender means that it's legal, and therefore the tender part is that that's hiding the gun behind the legality, because the legal tender is that the proprietors, because it's government backed, must take that currency for goods that have value. And they're giving them paper that has no value for the goods that are produced that have value. And you have to do it, because if you don't do it, you go to jail. There's a gun behind that. Nothing tender about it. This is a mandate. And they use all this code language where people can't follow that there's a gun. The government has a gun. And that's not what these persons died for. And I want to pay respects to the fallen soldiers. And what I'm calling for in my article today, I finished my article before I came to the studio. And what I'm calling for in my article is something that nobody else is calling for in these places like in New Orleans, where this politician not worth two dead flies. I'm talking about this Mitch Landrieu down there, the mayor of New Orleans. This man should be, if people were aware of what these politicians are doing, they'd throw these scoundrels out of office. They're out there attacking these monuments.
You know, the thing is, the left is doing a good thing for ourselves in a way. They're trying to take away these monuments to the Confederates and all that, Confederacy. I think largely because it's done by the Democrats, because they don't want people to actually ask who controlled the Democratic, who was large, who was at hand at it, who was a big part of this was the Democratic Party.
Yeah, no question.
See, they want to rewrite history so they can gloss over the fact that they were the biggest racists, the biggest xenophobes, the biggest bigots. They were the biggest. Yeah. The Republicans actually don't have a stellar record, but a much better record than the Democrats.
Sure, it's this right here. It's like washing your hands of it. Like if you call for the removal of monuments, then what you're really saying by that, the implication of it is that you are disavowing any affiliation of your party with it. But the only party that's affiliated with is the Democratic Party. And the only ones calling for the monuments be removed are members of the Democratic Party, John. It's a erasure of their own history from memory by doing this in public, that then blurs the line of if they're calling for it to be removed, then who was that did it in the past? It was the Republicans.
Yeah, the thing is, what it is with the left, and it's always with the left, because they like the psychology stuff. See, they like the alleged social sciences. My degree's in that area, okay, by the way. Mm-hmm. But they tell you not to stereotype, pigeonhole, or categorize people. That's actually exactly what they largely do. Sociologists do that. The WASP, they got those terms for people. So they categorize, stereotype, pigeonhole, put everybody in nice slots, and conceptualize through their own. It's all through their own interpretation, though. Mm-hmm. See, and that's what the left is so exceedingly excited to do. Yeah, because they want to be able to recast this thing where there's no mention, not a blip, that these people were Democrats. The Andrew Jackson was a Democrat. Right. They removed the Trail of Tears, all this stuff. They don't want to. They don't want to own up to the fact that they're the thing they're projecting. They want to see that anything that they want to say you have these attributes that they find distasteful in themselves, and they want to put it on you, so now they can hate you because they can't hate themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of projection. You said Andrew Jackson, the 7th president of the United States, who was elected in 1828. He ran in 1824, but and although he got a majority of the popular votes, he did not become president because he didn't have the required number of electoral votes. And Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, the 2nd president, John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay, who was in the House of Representatives, they ganged up on Jackson and denied him the presidency because they came together and blocked him. And since the popular vote does not elect the president of the United States, and I will contend this also, and this is something that nobody else has said, I also contend that the electoral votes do not elect the president. The president elected by the states. the states cast the electoral votes, but the election of the president comes from the states, and it takes a combination of states uniting around enough of them on one side of the presidential campaign and then another, enough of them consolidate and unite around a candidate, and they have they divide up the electoral vote among the states, and the states cast their ballot, and the president is elected by the states. Now you count the electoral votes, but if you give me a half plus one of the electoral votes, and then you give everybody else the rest of the electoral votes, and then I cast the electoral votes for the president, and I do the casting of those votes. So did the electoral votes elect the president, or did I elect the president? You see, the votes is what the states are casting, but the person behind the electoral votes are the states. It's amazing to me that people can't see that, because nobody says that. But who's casting the electoral votes? And you need 270 electoral votes, and Donald Trump had 304. He really deserved 306. But these electors in Texas tried to defeat Donald Trump by acting like they want that the Constitution allows it was set up. The Electoral College was set up so that they could vote differently from the popular vote if they felt that they need to stop what the popular vote had done in terms of putting the office holder there. They could act as a safeguard, check and balance against the voters of the country. And that's what Larry Lessig at Harvard University was contending, and some of these other scoundrels were contending. Either they don't know what they're talking about, or these people are totally dishonest, and they want to and they start quoting the Federalist Papers, and they know you've not read the Federalist Papers, and they think they can just throw anything out there, and nobody's gonna catch them at it. And so they said Alexander Hamilton. One used Hamilton because of the Broadway play called Hamilton.
Yeah, I saw somebody posting that too. Like we're a Hamiltonian country now. Well, I know a little bit about Alexander Hamilton. He was from the West Indies originally.
Yeah, he was.
But now I don't understand why they make such a big thing about it. They're almost, in that play, they're almost like depicting him as black himself, or they were trying to allude to that with all the black actors in this play. From what the historical record I read, he was a mixture of he was a white ancestry, European, Scottish, I think mostly. So I don't see where that's African. But it just seems like what are they trying to say? I mean, they're not Jeffersonians. They say they're Hamiltonians. Well, Hamilton, one of the hallmarks that I am aware of, he fought for a centralized bank, which most of us, and there's a lot of the other founders, really had serious issues with that. Matter of fact, they feared a centralized bank more than they did a standing military.
Yes.
So I mean, and he's a mixed bag. Hamilton was a mixed bag.
He
good
was
attributes and bad. But
the best book, and here I'm saying the best book. I don't think you can top the book on Hamilton that was written by one of the great biographers of our times, and that's Ron Chernoff. You read a book by everything Chernoff writes is like 750 some odd page books. He's not writing his little, manuscripts. And anytime he does a biography, you don't really have to read anybody else. I mean, it's okay to cross-reference read other books, certainly. But when Chernoff does a biography, you pretty much got the cake there, because Chernoff is so thorough. He's done biographies on Washington. I particularly liked his biography of Morgan.
See, for what I've read of his, other reviews
very good.
of Chernoff's books, that he actually is he covers warts and all, good things, bad things, in between things.
Yes,
he covers it all. His research is, that's why I've always read about him. So I never read anything by him. I just read excerpts from his stuff. But I mean, he seems to show people warts and all.
Yeah, he's a little bit different. He's a little bit different than I'll tell you somebody who I don't have any respect for. I know he's respected out there in the academic world. Stephen Oates. Now Oates has a book out called "Let the Trumpet Sound." That's it on the civil rights movement. But he got a book out on Abraham Lincoln, and I'll give you the page number of this. If it's not on that page number, you can come in and get me for this. But it's going to be on this page. On page 49 of this book called "Malice Toward None." See, you got to catch these guys. If see, they're pretty crafty. They don't think that people have enough scholarly acumen to come behind them. But on page 49 of that book called "Malice Toward None," now "Malice Toward None," by the way, is a dishonest title of the book, because what that joke is doing, that Stephen knows that's you. you can just shut up. Stephen O's called names of the book with "Malice Toward None." Now, "Malice Toward None" was what Lincoln said in 1865 when he was being for his second inauguration. So get this now. Here's Stephen O's writing this book, "Malice Toward None," and this is in the aftermath of a war that cost at a minimum 620,000 lives on the battlefield, and you're going to act like you can title a book about Lincoln with "Malice Toward None," and there's malice when you're killing folks. Give me a break.
See, the thing is, Lincoln is probably the most, it's like you could see so many facets to why some people really respect him, admire him. Some people, if you're a strict constitutionalist, he certainly is a villain. Because he suspended the writ of habeas corpus. He jailed people without any charges. He was horrible. Goodness. He was a horrible person in many ways. But when you contrast to the fact that we weren't in a vacuum here. This country was ripe. Okay, this had some resources galore. Mm-hmm. European countries hadn't forgotten about that, even though they largely abandoned it. And this was they were not until just written us off. They had written us off. They would want to come back here if they could do that. Yeah. So basically, if you look at the fact that southern states seceded, and they would have maybe found a foreign power that were more amiable to maybe allowing slavery to continue. Although most of them the European countries already gone the route of outlawing it, banning it in their countries. But let's face it, we've done this, and we've allowed bad stuff to go on in foreign countries. Mm-hmm. We enjoy the benefit of it. We don't want it on our shores. So we could have been colonized by other. It's the eternal what if machine. If all these other countries would have gotten in a foothold here again.
When they say, it's really interesting how. This history is written. They have this view. Let me read something here. Maybe it's a good time to read something else here. And I'm gonna come back to Stephen Oaks. I'm not forgetting what I said about him. I'm gonna give you the page number and what it says on that page. It's gonna be page 49 of this book called "Malice Toward None." And people won't even realize that Stephen Oaks is being dishonest in naming this book. Gonna go to Lincoln's. Go to Lincoln's second inaugural address, this dishonest man, and going to act like he can title a book about Lincoln with "Malice Toward None," which is what Lincoln said after he done shot everybody, then eliminated the South's, not the South's army, the South's militia. How many persons are going to say that? That what you had here was the South's militia rising up. Why? Because they were using the Second Amendment. Now you can say they were in uniform, but the militia rose up. Why? Because the North had invaded the South. Go and check that history out. And so here's Stephen O's talking about in this book with "Malice Toward None." He got 620,000 people dead at that point in time when he gave the second inaugural address. Now, what I noticed that Stephen O's did not do is that he did not talk about what Lincoln would have said in his first inaugural address. That's the one he delivered on March the 4th, 1861. What did Lincoln say there? And if anybody thinks that Lincoln was talking about ending slavery or fighting over slavery and all of that, go read that speech. I noticed that they like to start. It's just like that movie on Lincoln. Did you notice when they did that movie on Lincoln? And by the way, they had Lincoln speaking in a very manly tone. Lincoln had a very high pitched voice. And okay, but there's a lot of misdirection going on here. But you notice in that film they did on Lincoln, they were just simply called Lincoln, right? And what they did is that they started to film at the point of the war. You know, there are people at the beginning of the film. They got people coming into the room where Lincoln is, and they are repeating the Gettysburg Address, which was a 3-minute speech that Lincoln had given on the 19th of November, 1863, and they're going to act like people that memorized that speech. Give me a break. Give me a break. Are you kidding me? When that speech was given, they thought that was just like, what was Lincoln talking about?
Yeah.
7 years. Over time, you know, what happens is that if a person gets assassinated, John, it's like Malcolm X, right? When a person's assassinated, it brings people to the message. But when they gave that speech, nobody paying attention to that stuff.
When I was a kid, I read not a biography, but account of that, and it was on it was a packet of this, you know, duplication, you know, replicas of the Gettysburg, and basically he just wrote that off, and he said he thought it was like it fell flat. He thought it did himself, and from what I read, he thought it was just basically didn't. He said, I don't know if that's adequate, or he had really serious issues with the impact that he had. And let's face it, I mean, everything a person does, like you said, you alluded to, as after assassination, JFK become this greatest president.
Oh, yeah, look at where his status is right now.
He was a great guy in some ways. He was a good guy. Okay, even a Democrat, it takes me a lot to say that because I don't really like that party, but he was good enough. But he became a legend because he assassinated.
Yeah, I mean, we know his statement. It wasn't anything profound about it. Ask not what you can do for your country. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. That's socialism.
Yeah, I was going to say, either way you want to look at it, now his party's saying, no, let the government do more, and we're going to make anybody who tries to stop us, we're going to call them names. That's what they do.
So Abraham Lincoln, and they got Abraham Lincoln up there at the top as the greatest president of the United States. This man engaged in a war, unnecessary war, in which 620,000 persons were killed. Now that's the equivalent at that time, because there were only 33 million people in the country at that time, at the most. Probably 30 million if you go by conservative numbers, 22 million in the northern states, 8 million in the southern states. And the fact that this war went on, that they fought in 1861 to 1865, that war went on for 4 years. The mere fact that the South could stay in that war for 4 years is a testimony to the tenacity of the South in terms of their commitment to defend themselves, because this is a northern invasion of the South. And I wrote in my post today where when they caught this one Confederate soldier, and they asked him, why is the South fighting so tenaciously? Because they know they're going to lose, because all the advantages on the part of the North. So why are you fighting when you know the outcome is already determined? And the answer that soldiers gave them was that the answer was, because you're down here. By the way, I would tell you this also, since everybody want to make this a war about slavery and there's the good guys in the North. You got to be kidding me. The good guys and the bad guys. They're teaching this stuff in these classrooms, in these government-run schools. All that stuff is nonsense. I'm gonna read something from this book here in a minute, from the preface of this book, and I'll tell you what the name of the book is in just a minute. But let's go. I talked about one of the white Confederates. How many people are aware that there were black Confederates? Anybody aware of that? Where's Denzel? You know, Car 54. Where are you? Where's Denzel on this film? Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman starred in the film called Glory, and that's fine to make that film of the Colonel Shaw, Robert Shaw, coming out of Boston, which was a bastion of liberalism at that time. You know, Massachusetts is one of our more liberal states, although no state takes the cake of California. Nobody's in that basket, that fruit cake. that's all. California is a country all to itself. I mean, we don't know what they're doing over there. But Massachusetts was that kind of place back in the day. Of course, it's been exceeded now by California, but it was a bastion of liberalism, and Robert Shaw, who was the general that was the head of the 54th, the Massachusetts 54th, which recruited the blacks. Of course, the Massachusetts 54th was blacks being recruited all over the country, and they served under the banner of the state of Massachusetts. And one of the person doing the recruiting, by the way, was Frederick Douglass. And so and they made a film about that, and that's okay to make that film. I'll tell you a film they're not going to make, because that was about the 186,000 blacks that fought in the Civil War. They're not going to make a film of any of the black Confederates that fought on the other side. And there were black Confederates that were fighting. Now, a lot of people are going to start saying, well, why would they be fighting for slavery? They weren't fighting for slavery. Can we get out of our mind this elementary school analysis of the Civil War? Let me read this at this point. Let me read something to you from this book. I brought two books to talk about Memorial Day, because I'm celebrating all of the soldiers who fell on their swords and sacrificed themselves for this country, and fell on the battlefields, both inside the country and outside the country, but made the ultimate sacrifice for this country, and they should be all given some respect on this day. If we're going to have Memorial Day, let's memorialize all the soldiers. That includes the Confederate soldiers. If I'm going to have a memorial in my home for Robert Shaw, who led the 54th, I'm going to have a memorial also for Stonewall Jackson. He fell on his sword also. Shaw died in the attack on Fort Wagner, which was impregnable. Nobody ever took that fort during the Civil War because of the barriers they had, the fortification they had in South Carolina. Nobody ever took that fort during the war because the Confederates had that fort fortified. And that firepower was so strong that the 54th earned its spurs by trying to take that fort. And they weren't able to do it, but nobody else was able to do it. But I tell you one thing that didn't happen there. There was a question about whether or not blacks would fight. But after Fort Wagner, nobody had that question mark anymore, because there was not one of those persons under that tremendous fusillade of firepower. There was not one of them that was shot in their back. They died facing the opposition. So I honor that. I also honor the ones that were in fact fighting what their claims were, because this war was not over slavery. If there are blacks that are in the Confederate Army, you think they're fighting to maintain slavery? They had the one soldier that was Confederate soldier. They asked him, why are you all fighting so tenaciously? He said, because you're down here. They asked one of the black Confederates that had been captured on the battlefield. And they said to him, if you will in fact disavow your affiliation with the Confederacy, then we will in fact give you your freedom, just to pledge allegiance to the Union. And that black Confederate said, I can't do nothing like that. And these are his words. I'm going to use his words, not mine. He wasn't politically correct. He said, I can't do nothing like that. I'm a secession nigger. In other words, that would be against his honor. And why was he fighting? Let me tell you something. You got to go back and read these books. You got to go read these books that's not in these classrooms. You got to read this book right here by these two brothers. Both of them they're twins, James Ronald Kennedy and Walter Donald Kennedy. Now they don't have first names that are similar. You know how sometimes you have a first name and they be very similar in how they sound. They got the middle name as the connection, that they're twins. Ronald and Donald. Maybe that's what he got. Maybe that's what he got the McDonald name from. James Ronald Kennedy and Walter Donald Kennedy. And the name of their book, these two North Carolina writers from the South and defending the South, they got this book called Was Jefferson Davis Right? Was Jefferson Davis right? And Jefferson Davis, you know, was the president of the Confederate States. And let's see, Jefferson Davis would have died in 1889. And he had been arrested, by the way, didn't die in battle, but he was arrested. Don't tell me. I'm going to get this date straight. If I get it wrong, I'm going to give everybody that's listening to this program $100. You ain't going to get paid. Let's see, I got to think of this date here. I got the date somewhere in the left frontal lobe or the right frontal lobe. Let me think of it for a minute. Let's see, the war ended at Appomattox, April of 1865. Okay, so Jefferson Davis, you can take this one to the bank, was arrested May the 10th, 1865. Now, if that's wrong, then everybody that's listening to this program, you're going to get a steak there. You're going to get some barbecue today. And I'll have to go back to the store and buy some more ribs. But you won't be getting any payment here. That's exactly the date. And so Jefferson Davis was arrested on that date. But I'll tell you what they didn't do. He begged for the opportunity to defend himself. He begged for the opportunity to be taken to trial on the charges against him. And they incarcerated him for a period of time, but they dared not bring him. They kept talking during the war, are we going to hang Jefferson Davis on a sour apple tree?
But how come you notice that he didn't lose his citizenship though, did he?
No, he didn't lose it, and they know, John. The reason why he never lost is because they were brought him to trial.
Because they knew enough about the law that if it was brought up.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, see, but they Robert E. Lee lost his citizenship.
Yeah, the fighter, really, we need to restore. That's what I'm going to be fighting for on these Memorial Days from here on out. And I'm fighting for it today, as a matter of fact, in my post. I did a two-part series, one yesterday and I finished it today, on what I'll be celebrating on Memorial Day. And I'll be celebrating all the fallen soldiers. And we're not going to be a whole nation, by the way, until we make the Memorial Day one in which we pay obeisance to all the soldiers who fell on the battlefields of this country, and that includes the Union soldiers as well as the Confederate soldiers, both of them, because there were principles involved in both. The soldiers that were in the Union Army, they weren't fighting for the ending of slavery because slavery had not been made an issue when the war first started. They were fighting because they felt that there should not be a dissolution of the Union. And for 2 years, this was a war to preserve the Union. If anybody doubt that, go and read what Abraham Lincoln wrote on August the 19th, 1862, where Lincoln wrote a response to Horace Greeley, who was the editor of the New York Tribune, and Horace Greeley was criticizing Abraham Lincoln about his prosecution of the war and the way he was going about it, because he wasn't really liberating any of he was sending his slaves back to if they escaped, he sent them back. And Lincoln wrote him and said, "My paramount object in the struggle is to save the Union." Paramount meaning that his main objective was to save the Union. And he said, if I could do it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. If I could save the Union by freeing none of the slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing some of the slaves and leaving the others alone, I would do it. But whatever I do about slavery, I do it because I believe it helps preserve this Union. That was his focus. And later on, 2 years into the war, and the year after he had made that statement to Horace Greeley, on January the 1st, 1863, he signed a military document called the Emancipation Proclamation. And not one slave was freed as a requirement of it, as a result of it. Not one slave was freed. And don't forget that it did not even apply to the slaves in the states that were inside the Union, and there were 1/4 of the enslaved population that was in the Union states. 800,000 of them were in the 4 so-called border states. And I think they use the word border states to keep from calling them Union states. Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, and Missouri. And they had a combined total of 800,000 slaves in those states, and none of those states were affected by or touched by the Emancipation Proclamation. And then he's going to free the slaves in these rebellious states, and none of them are freed because they're in war.
That was like basically like what Rush Limbaugh used to call a symbolic gesture over any substance. It's like, yeah, the areas we don't control, you're free at. We don't have any control over, you're free in. Like they could actually get word of that anyway to them, But
yeah, and people are celebrating Juneteenth, and they don't have a clue. Because they say, well, the last slaves that heard about the Emancipation Proclamation was not until June the 19th of 1865. Okay, so June the 19th, 1865. So if they had heard about it in 1863, it would not have made any difference, because Texas is one of the Confederate states. And Lincoln had no reach into Texas, like he didn't have any reach into South Carolina, the first state to secede from the Union. So these are all, mischaracterizations, misunderstandings, misconceptions
by the way,
of the Civil War, so-called Civil War.
We just found this out, too. They're trying to use excuse maybe because there was white soldiers, a Confederacy, they're actually standing against the United States government. Well, my friend just pulled up here on a Kindle, using the internet. He found on 1891 Tennessee people in Tennessee could get, pensions for being Confederate soldiers, even ones who were from other states, including black soldiers who fought in the Civil War. So that was beginning there. So they already were compensated. So even back then there was recognition and reconciliation.
Yes, and we need to get back to that, John, because we are doing a disservice to this country by this balkanization. And when you do things like that, where you take people whose ancestors fought in this war because they were fighting against Northern invasion, and to take that from them, you are taking away their heritage, and they're not gonna join in with you to have this country whole, and this country is attacking their ancestry.
Another thing is, too, all the Union soldiers in uniform going down south weren't all gung-ho about killing those Rebs, okay? If you ever watched the movie, seen the movie Gangs of New York? It's set in New York City, but it's really built upon, they took a short story, really extrapolated. But anyway, I got the original story at home. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they have these soldiers coming in, these people are coming in right on the docks there at New York, right, coming from Ireland, other parts of the world. As soon as they get here, they'll be inducted into the Union Army. Okay, well, a lot of these, the native borns, as they were called in the movie, were resisting or being pulled into this fray because they knew the Constitution, Bill of Rights better. They said, hey, we don't have we can't pull you. This is not a fight we want to be part of. Oh no! And then they try to demonize them for staying on that principle. Mm-hmm. So that's what that approach was taken. I remember reading other historical accounts was taken back then as well.
John, you make an excellent point. If we're going to heal this nation, we're going to have to respect that persons were fighting this war, this divisive war, based upon the differing views that was standing upon the different vested interests. And people want to make this a war about slavery because you've got to explain why you have a war on this soil in which 620,000, these are the conservative estimates, 620,000 persons lost their lives. Now, to give you an equivalent number based upon the population then, population now, the equivalent number of those persons that died in that war would be equivalent to today's terms of 5 million people, given that you have 330 million people in the country right now. So go back to the time when you had 30 million, and then look at when you have 10 times that number, 300 million plus people, and it's 5 million persons that were killed in that time period. You got to be able to justify why that many persons died. So you got this thing about the morality of it, that Lincoln was in fact prosecuting the war because he wanted to free the slaves. And Stephen Oates got this book out here talking about with malice toward none, because what he's doing is a clever cover-up. That he wants to talk about Lincoln in the second inaugural address, when the nation's the South had been brought back into the Union under force. In other words, you have the Union now under the bayonet, which was never the intention of the framers. The framers had this idea that you have a confederation of states where we are republics. We are 13 republics that are voluntarily associating because of the freedoms guaranteed to all in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, where it says that every government, the states are guaranteed a republican form of government. And what does that mean? Anybody has interrogated what Article 4, Section 4 means? That every state is guaranteed a republican form of government, where in each state, the people have the right to order the business of that state. And what the states did, the people voted in majority to secede from the Union. And they were acting like they never heard that premise before under Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln changed the Union. He didn't save the Union, he destroyed the Union. And then set another union up in his place. Let me read this before we go off the air. In the preface of the book called "Was Jefferson Davis Right?", they make this comment on the first page of the preface, and it reads this way: "In order to have a balanced view of such a momentous event," talking about the Civil War, "one must be possessed with more than just a rudimentary understanding of the officially accepted view of this catastrophic conflict. You must have more than a rudimentary, meaning an elementary, understanding of this officially accepted view of this catastrophic conflict. And the simplistic understanding is it was a war over slavery, case closed, and that's the only issue, when that's nothing but nonsense. I'm going to be celebrating all of the soldiers who fell, because I think that all of them have given us this day, this moment. And I'll just leave you with this book right here as another reading assignment. That's a book written by the Kennedys, again, the Kennedy brothers, James Ronald Kennedy and Walter Donald Kennedy. And the name of their book is called "The South Was Right." You need to read these books to get a more balanced view. And then we're going to start to hold these politicians accountable that are attacking these monuments and dividing this country. Okay, hope you have a nice Memorial Day. I'm going home now to barbecue and going to have a nice Memorial Day. And I'll be thinking about those who are the fallen soldiers. Hope you will too. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.